You hate to call a player out, but we haven't seen or heard from Donovan Ezeiruaku all season. He's played, but his numbers haven't been there. What's going on? And could this UVA BC game be one of those million different outcome games again where we could see things happen all over the place and anything could happen? We'll talk all about that and some basketball news on today's show.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Locked On BC. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Make every moment more. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege today. Terms and conditions apply. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. Hope you guys are having an excellent evening if you're listening live. And if you're listening on Thursday morning, hope you're all doing well as well. So on Wednesday, Mitch Wolf, our staff writer for Eagle Insider and guest of the show twice a week during football season, got to go do the additional availability for Jeff Hafley. One of the things that came up that he talked about was Donovan Ezeiruaku. Now, if there was any player this season that had more hype, it would have to be, BC's star defensive end. He was all ACC, he was second or third in the conference in sacks last year, and it's been a vanishing act. 4 games he's had 1 pressure. He's had more penalties than he's had pressures. That's not good. And with his struggles has gone the BC defense. So Mitch asked him about that. Mitch asked Hafley about it. And, he talked a little bit about how the quarterbacks that they've played are not the types that, maybe are the ones you could get sacks on. He talked about how they're going to scheme to get things going for Ezeiruaku. But I look at this game and I take all of those, I don't want to call them excuses, but what he had to say, and I throw them out the window. Tony Muskett is going to start for UVA on Saturday. Anthony Calendia is not going to. Tony Elliott already announced that. Or they could both play. We don't even know what's going to happen yet. But there's one big key with this team that I feel like all the other teams lacked. And that is a bad offensive line. And an offensive line, I believe, that's near the bottom of the country in sacks allowed. You add in 2 quarterbacks that aren't particularly mobile, and this needs to be the game that all these issues and things that have caused Donovan Ezeiruaku to not get a sack or not get many pressures, they need to go out the window. He has to get out there. Now, Hafley said, they're going to scheme up some stuff to get him going. I don't know if that's more blitzes or trying to get some of those chips and extra blockers off of him so they get him going. But I need to see it to believe it. I don't know what's going on here. This is bizarre because you had a guy that was so dominant, not anyone dominant, but very, very talented. To go from that to completely disappeared, it is odd. It just doesn't happen. And with his struggles, it also impacts the Sheeta Salahs, the Edward Kalengis, and Neto Akpala to an extent. Because those guys are not, what they were getting favorable matchups last year. When you had Ezeiruaku causing issues, it was easier to have those guys do more. Even if they are doubling up on Ezeiruaku right now, the other guys aren't doing anything. I think what the big issue here is all the talk this week has been about the secondary and how bad they played. And I get that. They played poor. They really did. but we can't give a free pass to many of the other levels of this defense that have also struggled. Ezeiruaku is as guilty as some of these other guys. He's got to get up there and play. Now, Hafley said, and again, I'm just telling you what he said. His perspective is that he's not struggling in run defense. It's just in the pass rush, and that'll come, I guess. I watched Jaeden just thrash through that defense, and I'm not sure how many went by him, but it seemed like Jordan was running whenever he wanted to. But maybe he has a point there. You know, NIU did run the ball, but remember, they were running for like 2 to 3 yards a clip. Holy Cross was able to run a little bit, but a lot of it was Sluka with design scrambles. And I thought the defense did a great job against Trey Benson. So maybe that's the case there. But there's some things with this defense that you're just missing. Pass rush and interceptions. BC has 1 interception on the season. And if you were to ask me when it happened, I think it happened against NIU. I don't even remember. I think it was the NIU game, right? Those things are intertwined because when you get pressure on a quarterback, you force them to make bad decisions. When they make bad decisions, that's when interceptions happen. But when the quarterback doesn't have to worry about that, whether it's because he's agile or there's no pressure, then you're not going to get they're going to be able to make their reads and not make stupid passes. So this is a big weekend. This, as I put in the title of this is a time to step up for Ezeiruaku and company. This defensive line needs to have a big game. And maybe it's not Ezeiruaku. Maybe he's doubled up, but he gets a pressure or two. That's okay. Maybe it's Salah or someone else that gets in and makes a few plays. But you got to start getting some hits. And if you can't get pressure against a team like UVA, then this problem is bigger than we thought. This problem isn't they can't stop mobile quarterbacks problem. They can't get pressure on mobile quarterbacks. This is they can't get pressure, period, problem. And that's bigger. And that's scary because, I mean, at the beginning of this year, all we were talking about was how this defensive line was going to be deep and it was going to be scary. They have not been that at all. And I think this is gotta be this has to be their step up game. This has to be the game where they silence the doubters and get some big plays. And I think it may happen, but I have a hard time when I'm at that point now, and we'll talk about it with Mitch tomorrow, where I'm having a hard time making predictions on anything because BC just has this tendency to, I mean, either regress or make every game like a nail biter. So I don't even want to like predict based off of statistics anymore. Because if you look at the statistics, you think BC is going to win more. We'll get into more of this though. I don't want to jump ahead in just a moment. But if you know me, you know I love our friends over at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Last night, I put a nice little wager down on the Philadelphia Eagles to cover against the Bucs. They did that easily. I was a winner. Felt good. And I can't wait for next weekend. There's going to be some great football games, college football. Going to get some action there on FanDuel. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Locked On BC, AJ Black here. And this weekend, you have two teams that combined for 1-7. They're 1-7 on the season. This is a sicko game if there ever was a sicko game. And when we talked to Jackie Franchuli yesterday of 247 Wahoos, listening to her talk, if you were to close your eyes, other than she's a woman and I'm a man, you would hear her, what she was saying about UVA, and you say, wow, that sounds a lot like what BC's having issues with. With some of their issues, with penalties, with mistakes, drops, all sorts of issues on that front. And it makes the two teams sound awfully similar. You had up until this point, you had two young quarterbacks, but it's going to be Tony Muskett now. And you have two coaches that are honestly starting to feel the heat a little bit. Elliott a little bit less, but Hafley definitely is feeling it, right? So you get this game together. You put these two programs in the same building and let them duke it out. Now I'm looking at the weather for Saturday, and I'm seeing the potential for rain. 70% chance, according to my iPhone, which I checked before I recorded today. This game could get weird. When you have two bad teams that make lots of mistakes, playing in sloppy weather, lots of things could happen. Now, I said earlier, when I look at the strength, like if you were to look just on paper, who has the more electric players? Most of those check marks would go to BC. You would have, Thomas Castellanos, Ryan O'Keefe. They've got one really good wide receiver. Another one's doing pretty well. But as you heard Jackie say on yesterday's show, they got true freshmen everywhere, and they're not recruiting blue chips. They're struggling. So you hear all that, and you're thinking, "Oh, BC." Your brain goes to, "Oh, BC should win this." But then again, it's Boston College, and we've seen all year that this is a team that has played down to their opponents, and this is a team that I saw someone post it the other day that since the Missouri game in 2021, they're 4-21 or something like that. They're riding a really bad streak right now. And so I have a hard time picking them to win a game like this or to win by a decidable margin. They could win it. I get the sense that it's going to get ugly. And I'm not sure how that ugliness is going to show to rear its head. Tony Muskett is probably a better fit for what BC could stop than what Calandia could do. Anthony Calandia could have probably hit some of those long passes that we saw against Louisville, especially in the rain. I worried that maybe BC would slip or something would happen and they get some touchdowns. That being said, I also don't see UVA stopping Castellanos. I expect Castellanos, depending on the weather, to have a really big game. So this game could get high scoring. It could be turnover prone. And I think there's going to be penalties. There's going to be ugliness. It's going to have all of that cropped up together. And what Boston College has to do, if you're talking about the future of this program with Jeff Hafley, this is about as much win as you can get, because you start the season off 1-4, your odds of making a bowl game are slim to none. You'd have to rip off a huge run of wins. And when you have Miami, who's playing really well right now down there, you got Syracuse, who's also playing really well right now. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, every other game, Georgia Tech, they're playing pretty well too. Haynes King's playing well. It all of a sudden looks like, you're in trouble if you don't start winning some games. BC has to pull this off. Hafley said, and I saw a lot of folks ripping him on it for it. The quote of the day from him was, "This thing is going to turn. I am very confident in that." I know a lot of folks were joking that has a lot of it'll come together and be beautiful vibes, and I get it. I don't know. I don't know what he can do to fix this. Like, you're a quarter of the way in and your team hasn't played a good football game yet. Every game has been marred with major issues. It's not like you had one game like the Florida State game, for instance, right? You lucked into a fumble that got you back into the game. That was a cool spot, but you then had 18 penalties that took you completely out of the game. You had 6 drops against NIU. You lucked into a win against Holy Cross. They should have lost that game. And against Louisville, they got, 570 yards of offense, 7 drops. The mistakes they just pile up. So I'm very much at the point now, and I know folks call me, a water carrier for Hafley, and you can say that if you want, that at this point, I need to see it to believe it. All this change and all this, they're going to step up and play better. Yeah, I hope they do, but I have to see it to believe it. I'm going to be skeptical about it because BC hasn't shown me that they can be that. They've shown me over and over again the complete opposite, that they find new ways to mess things up. They find new ways to lose games or to make it close. So when they play against UVA, and Mitch will be on, and I've heard buzz from Mitch that he may be more on the BC's going to blow them out route, I'm nowhere near that this week. I'm worried, and I'll be worried every other game this season because it's been disappointing. And they may put it together, and if they pull together a few wins, maybe that'll change my mind. But I haven't seen it yet, and you haven't seen it yet. And so this is just the end of it, right? Now, in our final segment, I'm going to switch it up to basketball. We haven't talked basketball in a while, but we now know what their complete conference schedule is, and I want to get into it and see what your thoughts are about who BC plays and what and when, and give my thoughts as well. We'll be back in just a moment. This is Locked On BC. I am your host, AJ Black. I have been saying all week that we have a special sale for, I think, another week. BC hockey blogger is now part of Eagle Insider. He has his first hockey preview up right now. It's 2 parts. I think I'm going to have the other part up on Friday. Details, all sorts of good analysis from a guy who knows the program inside and out, but you got to be a VIP. We have 50% off sale right now. You can join for, it's like $40 for the entire year. You'll get football news. You'll get, whatever happens at the end of the season, if it's more recruiting or something else, basketball news, basketball recruiting, hockey news. We'll have more and more added to it. We have Mitch's film reviews. You're going to have a ton of stuff. It's totally worth it if you haven't done it already. Now, let's look at the men's ACC schedule. I know if you're looking on YouTube, you probably can't read it, but BC starts their in-conference schedule on December 2nd at home against NC State. Now, I believe that's a Saturday or a Sunday game. It's a weekend game. And that's going to be a tough start to your ACC schedule. They're bringing back a lot of their talent. And they get their big center back, and they've been recruiting really well. They're going to be one of the better teams in the ACC. So to start off with that's a tough pull, but that's only one game. And, weirder things happen. And honestly, getting NC State early and at home before they can get their rhythm in might not be the worst thing in the world. I remember it was a couple of years ago, they caught Notre Dame early. And when Notre Dame was playing pretty well, and they beat him. So that I kind of like that. But then it starts, and I feel like the beginning of their ACC schedule is a lot harder than where it kind of goes on. They go and host Wake Forest. Wake Forest, BC's owned. I don't think if I remember correctly, I don't think Wake Forest has beat BC under Earl Grant as well as they played. So that's good. They got Georgia Tech, at Syracuse, and at Clemson. So 3 away games in the span of a week. We'll hear all about that, I'm sure. But Syracuse, tough. Georgia Tech, they got a new coach, Damon Stoudemire. And then Clemson, they've been battling back and forth with them. From there, you've got two out of your next 4 games are against Notre Dame, home and away. A sandwich between North Carolina and Virginia Tech. Then it's Syracuse, Florida State, Duke, Louisville, Miami. And what I wanted to get into, not just reading off the schedule, because you guys can read it yourself, is I like how some of these games are spread out for BC. you have over a month between, or about a month between when you play UNC at home and head to Duke. Those are going to be probably your 2 toughest games in conference that year. You get, I love the smattering. They've got Florida State twice, who were awful last year. They got Louisville twice, who was awful last year. And they're all kind of like smattered in between the tougher games. So you're kind of building in at least the ability to avoid some, like, a long string of losses. And obviously we think this team is good enough that they're going to be able to pull some upsets too. So, but you don't have like back-to-backs of like Duke, Syracuse, NC State, or anything like that. Like, I'm looking at one right now, right near the end. You've got Miami. So you got Duke, tough at Duke, but then you get Louisville, who I still think is going to be a mess. You have then Miami, tough. Then you get Florida State is going to be a mess. You get UVA, tough. Pitt, beatable team. Miami, tough. Louisville, again, right? So I feel like it's nice and balanced for them with games. Obviously, you want to win some of those tough games, but you have more reasonable games in between. So I like how the schedule's laid out for BC this year. They've got a tough out-of-conference schedule. We talked about this earlier. They're playing Vanderbilt, they're playing St. John's and Rick Pitino, and they're going into a multi-team conference series with Creighton. So they've got a tough schedule. They're building it up, but they got to pull together some wins. I can't wait to watch this season. I think they've got some talent. Let's see how some of these, I think the kids are going to be the ones that are going to be worth watching, like Donald Hand, who I don't know how long he's going to take to really get back to himself, but guys like Chaz Kelly and, Armani Mighty or Jaeden Hastings, some of these guys are going to have to step up for BC. We'll have to wait to see what happens. On tomorrow's show, we'll be joined by Mitch. Mitch will we'll both give our predictions. We'll give our picks of the week. And we'll talk about what BC has to do to win on Saturday. It's an episode you're not going to want to miss. So hit that like button right now and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. You'll get notified whenever we go live, even after games. I'm going to be at the game on Saturday, so I won't go live right after. I'll probably do it that evening. So I apologize. It's my one game I get to go with my family. I got a whole bunch of us going. I can't wait to go and watch with the fans. It's been a while. This is AJ Black. I'll be back again tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Thank you all so much. We'll see you all again soon. Take care.